All right, everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Monica Sari. I'm the VP here at Assessments 24/7. And we got an overwhelming response from everyone from our survey. And the number one topic that everyone wanted to hear about was more information on disc styles in the time of crisis in which we are in right now. So we are really excited to have Kathy Hansen, our wonderful instructional designer and certification director, to tell us more about that. We're also going to hear from our founder, Dr. Tony Alessandra, at the end. And our team that you see here is actually going to share some information about how their personal disc styles have shifted during this time, which I think you'll enjoy. Jen Larson, who's our VP of training right there, she's going to be live answering all of your questions on the Q&A. So please do feel free to partake, put comments on there, ask questions, and throughout the webinar, she's going to be answering them live. I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. So at the very end of this webinar, you can go back and see this again or listen to it whenever you have time. And we also will send you the slide deck, so you'll have that at the end. We also want to highly encourage you to continue to participate in the survey. We're going to be doing more of these webinars, and we want to create content that you all want. So we really appreciate that. And then last but not least, we are going to be offering an ebook promotion. It's usually $99, but today, and with your registration through the webinar, it's only $49. So let's sit back and relax and get started, and I'll hand it over to Kathy. Take it away.
Thank you, Monica, and hello to everybody who is joining us. As Monica said, Jennifer is also here. She is answering all of your disc-related questions behind the scenes. Please use the Q&A button to ask those questions versus the chat. Suzette is also here to answer any general questions as you go through. And again, just use that Q&A so that so that they can keep track of all of those, and see if we can't get those answered as we go through this webinar. So for those of you who are already DISC certified, this is going to be a deeper dive into stress. And by the way, all of this information is taken from your trainer materials that you already have access to. So if you don't tap into those frequently, I want to really encourage you to go back to those, because there are some great tools that give you a deeper dive into different aspects of DISC. For those of you who maybe have a foundation but are not yet certified in DISC, this will be some next level learning. And to those who might be brand new to DISC, maybe you don't have any kind of foundation, it's maybe you're asking yourself, what is DISC? This will also be very helpful information for you. And to those of you who aren't certified, if you decide that you want more after this, of course, you can go through a certification program. I would be your coach, and I'd be thrilled to do that. But we really wanted to provide something for you that would be helpful in this time of stress and even crisis that you can use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's understanding yourself or the people around you and what they're going through, and to help you to be able to navigate that a little bit better. So let's dive right in. So we're going to first talk about DISC needs, fears, and emotions. So we're going to lay the foundation with that. Then we're going to talk about the next level, which is DISC in stress, and then in crisis. We're also going to bring in just a little bit of EIQ and show you the combination of DISC and emotional intelligence. That's EIQ. And as Monica mentioned, you're going to hear a little bit from the team. They're going to give you just a short testimonial of how they are dealing with it from their DISC style perspective. And then again, we have that follow-up survey. You're going to have an opportunity to win 2 free assessments if you fill that out. We'll give you more details at the end. So let's dive right in. So on this next slide, those of you who are certified or have taken a DISC assessment, you might recognize this little section that's at the top of pages 11 and 12 on your word sketches. And we often talk about this as being a bit of a super cape for communication, because it tells you the needs, the core emotions and the fears of each of the styles at the high level. So then if you're able to identify a person's style or their primary style, and yes, we know most people have more than one core style, so we may bounce around in between those. But if we have a fundamental understanding of what each of those styles tends to need, what their core emotions are, and what they fear, we can work to meet those needs and eliminate those fears. In day-to-day conversation on a good day, but in stress, it can really help us navigate through that as well. So I'm going to go through this with you quickly to lay that foundation. So our D styles, they're the ones who are focused on problems and tasks, right? They're the doers. They tend to need challenges to solve and authority. And by the way, when we talk about these, we're talking about tendencies, okay? So they may be stronger or not as strong in you. And of course, we want to keep in mind your blend. So they need challenges to solve. You might hear them say things like, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to solve problems. That's their big focus. Their core emotions are anger and impatience. Now that doesn't mean that they're angry people all the time, but they do have a sense of urgency behind everything. And if things don't happen in their timeline, they tend to get patient with that or impatient with that. They fear being taken advantage of or having lack of control. And we're going to want to keep that in mind throughout the rest of this training today. I styles who are focused on people, they're all about social relationships and friendly environments. The more friends, the better. The more people, the better. There are optimists in the world. They're optimistic and trusting. I like to say they tend to spread glitter over everything. It's good. Everything's going to work out just fine. For them, their fears are being left out or having loss of social approval. Again, keep that in mind as we move forward. Our S styles are the stable people in our group. They tend to need a system, teams, and a stable environment. They're all about taking care of everybody else. Their emotions are patience and non-expression. I want to explain that a little bit. So the higher their score, the more patient they are. They can take a lot, and it takes a lot to bring them to their threshold of that patience. But they also tend to be non-expressive. They have emotions, but they don't show it. So they tend to be the ones who bottle everything up, and they usually don't share their emotions, but for a couple, maybe 2 or 3 people in their life. Otherwise, they keep that really bottled up and close to them. So they could be falling apart on the inside and you would never know it. So when you have that combination, if your patience is being tried over and over and over again, and you're bottling all of that up, it can produce under stress a big response. And we'll talk about that more. They fear sudden change. They can handle change, but sudden change is very difficult, and loss of security and stability. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Our C styles are all about having rules to follow and data to analyze. It's what they need. It's how they're wired. Their biggest emotions are fear and concern, and it's about making mistakes. So they're very fearful of making mistakes and having other people know that they made those mistakes. So their biggest fear then is of being criticized or having loss of accuracy and quality. So that's why they analyze things. Now, all of these are positive out there in the world. We need all 4 of those styles, but under stress, some of those behavioral expressions can really take it to the limit for them. So we want to keep in mind underneath here in DISC, we talk about the natural versus the adapted style. Our certified practitioners are aware of that. Essentially, our adapted style is us interacting with the world, and it can change frequently based on the relationship, the situation, or the environment. And right now, all 3 of those things are changing on a day-to-day basis. Let's take a quick little poll. So based on, Monica's going to pull this up here, based on what you either already know about DISC, and maybe you're very familiar with your core style or styles, or if you are brand new to this, and this is your first exposure to it, think about, based on that description right here, which style are you most identifying with right now? So bear with us for a moment as we get that poll up. Are you able to find that, Monica? If not, we can move on.
It's up, and can you not see it?
I cannot, but we'll go ahead and if it's up and everybody is answering that, that's wonderful. And then let's just give it a moment. And then Monica, you can go ahead and share the results of that.
So I launched it and
it's not showing. That's okay. Let's go ahead and move on. No problem.
Okay.
So think about.
Sorry about that. I launched it and 2 people said D. That's all.
That's okay. Wonderful. No problem. Just be thinking about which one you most identify with right now, but you may be identifying with more than one of these at a time. So let's go ahead and move on. So I want to talk to you about, if you can go ahead to that next slide. So let's talk about intention versus behavior. So on a good day, on any day, we tend to judge ourselves based on our own intentions. Others judge us on what they see, so our behavior. And we, in turn, judge them on their behaviors. And in stress, that can really be intensified. And often in stress, those two things do not align. In your DISC report, if you have one, I believe it's page 18, which is the stress page. At the very top, you'll see 2 columns. And one column says how you might be perceiving yourself when you're stressed. The other column is how others might be perceiving you when you're stressed. Often those 2 things don't align. And when that happens, that can be a source of now additional tension that's added to the equation of stress. So you want to really keep those things in mind, and we're going to go through those with each of the styles. So a couple of little graphics over here. You might see yourself as a sweet little kitty, and others might see you as a fierce lion. The opposite may be true. You might see yourself as a fierce lion, and other people see you as a sweet little cat. Okay, over here on the right, you can see how there's a little bit of disconnect here where the 2 ladies think they're really easy to talk to, but the gentleman thinks, yeah, but you're not good listeners. So another way to disconnect. So let's go ahead and move on. So we're going to talk about backup behaviors. So in stress, what happens is we tend to do whatever we can to alleviate that stress, to reduce it. And often what happens is we dump onto others who might be or who we perceive to be responsible for that tension. Now, with each of the styles comes unproductive but characteristic ways of or manners of that backup behavior. It doesn't mean that we're expressing them, but each of the styles has a tendency towards that. Now, keep in mind that DISC does not measure emotional intelligence. So we're not talking about that as part of the equation at this point. So you may be very, very aware of your behavioral tendencies, especially in stress. We'll talk about how emotional intelligence comes into play as we move forward. So let's look at the backup behaviors for each of the styles and what their behavioral tendencies might be and what they need when they're stressed. So the D style will tend to dictate in order to control. So remember that their biggest fear is being out of control. So when they are stressed, they may appear to be these things. So those of you who tend to be D styles out there right now, this is how you might be appearing to other people when you're stressed. You might have a different intention entirely, but the perception or how you're being judged is by what other people see. And it might look a little bit like this, or it might look a lot like this. D styles need these things over here when they're stressed. So they need to be in control of a situation. Right now, they can't be in control of the timeline of this whole crisis that's going on. You can't control coronavirus by yourself. So that's going to be a big stressor. So we're going to talk about how do we alleviate that stress a little bit later on. Let's look at the I style. So the I style will tend to disregard. Remember, there are optimists, so they just want to think about happy things. They want people to come together. They want to motivate people. So they tend to disregard things when it becomes really stressful. And this is how they may appear. All of these things, whether that is your intention or not, this is how it might come across when you are stressed. These are the things they tend to need when they're stressed. And in particular, our I styles may verbally attack the source of stress when that stress is really high, when they reach their boiling point. Often they'll then feel bad about that later, recognizing that that person really isn't the source, even if that's where that might be coming from originally. So keep that in mind as well. So let's talk about our S styles. Our S styles will tend to submit in order to avoid conflict. So whether or not they intend, depending on, whatever it is that they intend, this is how they might appear. So they might appear passive or dependent or hesitant. It's because, remember, they have a need for safety and security. And when they're in stress, they don't have that. Some of those things might be out of their reach or out of their control. And so their behavioral expression might change a little bit, and they might look this way to other people. When they're in stress, these are the things that they need. They tend to need a lot of reassurance, personal assurance. They need to slow it down so that if they're, asked to make quick decisions, that can be really difficult. Here's a key thing to keep in mind about S styles under stress. They may appear to go along, but resentment can build. So remember that formula of they can tend to appear to go along with things, but their emotions are building and building, and they're bottling them up. And when that happens, especially under stress, they can start to become resentful. So keep that in mind. So let's move on to our C styles. So our C styles also avoid conflict, but in a different way than the S styles. They'll tend to withdraw. They'll just kind of disappear. So whatever their intention, whether they intend it or not, this is how they might appear to you. They might be slow to act. They might be unable to meet some deadlines if they have any. Over-reliant on data and documentation. That's going to be in high alert right now because they want data about what's going on. And there's so much information flying out there about coronavirus and what to do and what's happening in the world and locally as well, that they're going to be the ones to really focus on researching and finding the most accurate data possible. This is what they need over here. They want to know that they're making the right decision. And that can be really hard when you're stressed because you don't always get to have that assurance. So it's really important to understand that. They need a slow pace to be able to process information, and they need accuracy. So now that we have that layer of understanding, let's look at DISC in crisis. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding about DISC in stress, crisis is really just stress amplified. And so it can come across in a number of different ways. Excuse me. And it might really take you off guard. It might be very unexpected. So for example, their behavioral expression may change. So a person who's typically a very high D, they might suddenly become or appear to become, their behavioral expression might look more like an S style, which is the complete opposite of who they really are. So they might suddenly be that person who's taking care of everybody else in your world. And it might take you off guard for a little bit because that's not their normal behavioral expression. It's because they're trying to find a way to control this situation in whatever way they can. So their behavioral expression might change. Another thing that might happen is that their behaviors, their existing behaviors might intensify. So a high D might even become more controlling. A high S might turn into that person who's really not only just taking care of people in their own household, but really trying to do whatever they can to take care of the world at the same time. Another thing that can happen is that people can tend to respond to those backup unproductive behaviors with their own unproductive backup behavior. So remember, we're always coming from our own perspective and our own behavioral tendencies. And so when we are in stress and somebody does something from their own backup behavior, if we are not being thoughtful about what's going on and recognizing that for what it is, it's just stress, our immediate emotional response might be that we fight back, so to speak, or we respond with our own unproductive backup behaviors. And then you just have this tension going back and forth. So that's not helpful. So let's move on. Okay, so what can we do about all of this? I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between a thoughtful response and an emotional reaction. Typically in stress, we respond with emotional reactions unless we really become aware of this. So, for example, our D-style emotional response might be something like, if you can't stand the heat, get out of it. Or get out of the kitchen, just get it done, get over it, get it done. A more thoughtful response might be, you know, I understand that this is stressful, but let's focus on what we can control. Now, this can either be a D-style being cognizant of their own tendencies and sort of speaking this to themselves. Okay, I know I'm super stressed. I understand what's going on right now. I need to find something that I can control rather than focusing on something that I can't control and I'm blowing up all over people. So it can work in both ways. So let me give you a little bit of an example. I had the opportunity to watch an interaction between a couple who's been married for 42 years. Great couple. They actually counsel other couples through their church. So they have a really good, solid marriage. However, they too have struggles and they're very open and authentic about that. So I wasn't involved in the conversation, but I could tell just by their behavior and what they were talking about. She's clearly a D style and he is clearly an S style. So she needs to have control of something. He is that more supportive, sort of go with the flow kind of person, but they've now been quarantined together for a very long time. And they're in that older age group, and while they're healthy, she's absolutely terrified that they're going to get sick. So the one thing that she tries to control right now are the groceries that come into the house and how they come into the house. And she has this very intense sort of protocol and ritual that she goes through for every piece of food that comes into their house right now because she doesn't want them to get sick. Well, she's very aware, by the way, that she has a need to control things. He is really annoyed by this whole process. And he lets her know that. Most of the time he's very passive. So he's sort of stepping out of his own style right now because he's sort of being pushed to his limit. And he's really annoyed by this process. So they're kind of going back and forth. A more thoughtful way for them to deal with it might be this. If he would understand that she just needs to control something, and while she can't control what's going on out there in the world, this is something she can control. And it makes her feel better. From her perspective, she could actually say that to him. Listen, I know I have a tendency to control things. This helps me to feel better because it makes me feel like I'm protecting us. Now, from his perspective, where he can get out of this is a little bit more safety and security. So if she can say that to him, that's going to help him see the other side of it. So you kind of see how that works. So let's look at the I style. So the I style emotional response might be, hey, let's move on to something more positive. They're just going to disregard what's going on. More thoughtful, it's difficult to not see my friends. Can we find a time to get on a Zoom social call? And all of those things that I just said with that D-style example apply to this as well. Find ways to help them get what it is that they need right now because they're in crisis, and that's going to help them and it's going to help you. Let's look at the S style. So their emotional response might be, okay, if that's the way you must have it, we'll try it. But remember that resentment is going to continue to build and build. A more thoughtful response might be for them to say what it is that they need. I know things are uncertain right now. I need to know that we're all in this together and that we're going to get through it together. When they have that reassurance, remember, that's what they need when they're stressed. That's really going to help those styles. Let's look at the C style. So their emotional response might be, I can't help you with that any further. Do what you want. Remember, they're going to withdraw because they want to avoid any kind of conflict. A more thoughtful approach might be, I know this is stressful. I just need to unplug for a day. And if you're on the receiving end of that and you know a person is a C style, you can recognize those behaviors in them enough to know, even if this is new to you, you can recognize that. Let them unplug for a day, okay? Okay, so let's move on to the platinum rule. So those of you who are DISC certified or at least have worked with us for a while know that we use what we call the platinum rule with respect to DISC. And that means we treat others the way they want to be treated. So we all know the golden rule, and that's all about treating others the way you would have them treat you. And that's great for things like respect and dignity. But when it comes to interpersonal communication, it's really important to tune in to the needs and the fears of other styles, what their pace and priority are. Now, these are terms that our certified practitioners are going to understand. For those of you who are not, maybe consider that down the road. But we want to really pay attention to that. Be connected to your listening and holistic communication. Understand that everybody is operating from a space of stress right now. And understand that their behavioral expressions may change, just like we talked about. Now, identifying emotions right now, this is a little bit of EIQ, emotional intelligence. Sitting down and identifying your emotions right now is more critical than ever before. And maybe you're not the kind of person who likes to talk about your emotions, but if you can, at a minimum, be able to identify the emotion that you're feeling, maybe you at least write it out. That's going to help you alleviate the stress by identifying what's really going on. And then you can tap into more productive ways of dealing with that. Now, I know that this makes it sound like it's really easy. We know it is not lost on us that it is not. We're all in the same situation right now. We're quarantined. Many of you have kids at home. You have all kinds of things that you're juggling right now, but hopefully this information can at least help you to begin to navigate those relationships in these situations. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to hear from some of our team members. Suzette, Amy, Brenna, and Brandon are going to share a little bit of a testimony of how they're dealing with this current situation from their style. So we're going to begin with Suzette from her D style.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kathy. I would say with my D style, the first thing I noticed was, as you talked about before, losing control of everything. There is no control for me. I cannot lead anything. I can't do anything about what's happening every day. I kind of have to take it as is. So with that loss of control, I see myself sort of reaching out for other things I can control. And that's been, within my household. Making a pretty severe chore chart for my stepdaughter was probably one of the first steps, and kind of going for things like that. So trying to control whatever I can. And I think also to what you said earlier, I've sort of reached out and become more of an S. And I'm really starting to reach out more than I ever have to other people in my life, asking if they're okay, asking, how they're doing, and really worrying about that side and sort of coming out with that S style in me. But that's really been my experience with sort of my D style in this crisis.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzette. And that's such a great example of, and it's very interesting. So that sort of S style, it's not that Suzette is becoming an S style all of a sudden. She's still a D. It's from that need to control that her behavioral expression looks more like an S style, where she's trying to take care of everybody around her. And it's really awesome that Suzette is finding ways within her own household to control something. If it's a schedule or if it's the meal plan or whatever it is, because that can help her feel better and alleviate some of that stress. So thank you, Suzette. Let's move on to Amy from the I-Style perspective.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And I just want to start out by saying I think it's cruel and unusual punishment to ask an I to only talk for a minute, Kathy. But with that being said, I would say that kind of my I characteristics that are really being intensified right now is the social part. So I was like the first one in my friend group to start doing Zoom happy hours. And I started that maybe 2.5 weeks ago. And I've probably done 8 or 9 of them with different tribes of mine since then. And then on the more atypical side, I'm making lists like crazy and checking things off of them. I've probably been more productive in March than at any other time in my career. I am churning out content, marketing content like crazy right now, which is great for our team.
Thank you, Amy. That's so great. So yes, typical I-Style, all of those I-Style things, and it's great that you're tapping into finding ways to meet that need to be social. And once again, you're reaching to that opposite style of the C and being more structured. That's definitely more of a C and maybe even an S trait that Amy is exerting there. So all of those things are changing. She's responding to relationship situations and environment changing every single day. Thank you for that, Amy. Let's move on to Brenna from the S perspective.
Hi, everyone. For me, for the S style, one of the things is I tend to keep things bottled up, and right now there's just a little too much to keep bottled up. So I've been reaching out to my best friend, calling her every day to vent, and kind of venting on my poor husband a lot. And then I'm someone who needs security and stability, and it's been kind of hard to get that lately. So one of the things is I've been scheduling these weekly grocery curbside pickups that, you know we have everything we need every week, at least whatever's in stock. And then I can schedule that and plan it and have it all set up so that I know my family is kind of taken care of and we have what we need. And then lastly, I'm someone that really struggles with change and chaos, and having the kids home and just everything kind of uprooted with how I did it before has been really stressful. So I set like a schedule. And so every morning we do e-learning with my son. We've got all that figured out. My husband and I have kind of broken up responsibilities and made sure that we can get our work done and everything. So just having like a schedule has kind of helped me deal with all the chaos and the change and try to kind of control all that.
So great. Thank you so much for that, Brenna. And those are such common traits of the S style. She was a perfect person to come from that perspective, and really great productive versus unproductive ways to deal with that stress. So thank you for that. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Brandon from our C style. Take it away, Brandon.
Yeah, so in typical C style, really from the outset of this, there's this huge influx of information. I was following all of the Johns Hopkins data. I was looking at policies that were being enacted. I was looking at historical epidemiology cases all the way back to the Antonine Plague in Rome. And it was just too much, and, started having trouble sleeping because it's just too much to process every single day. And so I've really found it necessary to just basically, like we said before, completely unplug, and I'll just turn off my phone, turn off my computer, sit down with a book, maybe, spend some time out on the porch, and it really kind of helps me relax. I've kind of incorporated some meditation to kind of just get my mind refocused, and that's really worked well for me.
So great, Brandon. And the meditation, what a wonderful way for you to deal with that. And Brandon is a combination of C and S, so you probably heard a little bit of that, both of those coming out there. And meditation is such a great way for anybody really to deal with stressful situations And in his case, he's both an S and a C, so he really wants to avoid conflict. And he's come up with some really healthy, productive ways to deal with that. So thank you to the team for sharing those.
And Kathy, just to clarify, just so everybody who knows our team a little bit, that was Brandon Timish from our IT department, not Brandon Parker, the CEO. So if any of you were kind of wondering who that was and maybe a little confused, that was Brandon Timish.
Thank you, Suzette, for that. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a little bit of DISC and emotional intelligence. We won't go through all of these, but you'll have the recording. You can take the time to go through these in detail later. So just as an example, a high D style that has high emotional intelligence can come across as they can be assertive, ambitious, driving, strong-willed, and decisive. But if they are low EIQ, low emotional intelligence, maybe aggressive, demanding, egotistical, bossy, confrontational. I don't want to feel like I'm picking on the D's at all. They just are always the first letter that we identify there. So, so that's just an example. Now, you may typically have high emotional intelligence and you're very self-aware, very socially aware. You know what those things are that might hold you back. You know your behavioral tendencies. But in a situation like this, where it's stressful and it actually reaches a level of crisis that is ongoing, you may have days, moments when that sort of goes out the window. So, and we all have those, we're all human, so we don't need to feel bad about those things, but it's really important that you be in tune with how your behavioral expression may be coming across, because right now, more than ever, we have set a basic level need to get along and we need to alleviate stress as much as we can. You can take the time to go through the rest of these on your own. So we do have a DISC and emotional intelligence combination report. And whenever we do that, we do a deep dive into both so that you understand the integration of the two, which is so important. So with that, I hope that is really helpful information for all of you. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Monica.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was very informative. We appreciate your insights and your professionalism. You know this stuff, and it's wonderful to hear. And just a quick reminder, if anyone is interested in becoming certified in DISC, motivators, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, or learning styles, we offer that. And we also have a DISC workshop leader certification. All of these are virtual. They're all self-paced, and you do receive continuing education credits. Just reach out and let us know. We're so thankful for you to be a part of this. We really appreciate it. Please do click through to take the survey. The email that you're going to get shortly is going to include the recording of this webinar, the actual slide deck, and if you do complete the survey within that email, you will be entered to win 2 free assessments. The other last promotion that we're doing right now is this DISC virtual training and e-workbook. It's usually $99. We're doing it for only $49. So there'll be a link to purchase that in the email, so feel free and do that. And before we go, I just wanted to turn it over to Dr. Tony Alessandra really quickly for some last words. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you. This was very informative. Thank you, Kathy. Hey, Kathy, I'm surprised you didn't call on me because I'm a little bit of all 4. I'm what they call a quadraphonic schizophrenic. So I could have answered all 4 of these at once.
That's why I didn't.
Anyway, I did want to mention that with certification, I really think that certification is a great ROI, return on investment. You get a badge that you can have in your email SIG file or put on LinkedIn or your social media. And the badge truly differentiates you, not just the badge, but the badge and the knowledge, differentiates you from other coaches or trainers who are not certified in that subject. You know, the bottom line is this when it comes to certification. With certification, you get expertise. And with this expertise, you are actually able to charge more for your training, your client debriefs. People who are certified and do client debriefs charge anywhere from $150 plus more to do that debrief. The other beautiful thing is that when you become certified in any of these topics, you get some extra training materials. These are training materials that we in the past have charged for, but they're free. And with these additional training materials, you can use them to conduct, whether it be speeches, workshops, anything for a fee. When it comes to DISC, I have used DISC to do 1 hour speeches, to do 2 to 3 hour workshops. It's really good, a great return on investment. But I want to do one more special before we sign off, Monica. And let's call this, instead of a webinar, I'm going to call it a Zoominar. How does that sound? A Zoominar. But I spoke to my training team, which is Kathy and Jen, and they are willing to do a group DISC certification. Now, regular DISC certification, typically, whatever the charge is for the individual one, the group certification is only $795 a person, which is a fairly substantial discount. So if you are interested in even finding out more about this group DISC certification, why don't you send an email to sales@assessments24x7.com. Suzette, could you put that on the screen in the chat box so people can see that? It's sales@assessments24x7.com. There it is in the chat box. If you are interested in group certification, just shoot us an email with your interest and we will get back to you. And with that, I really appreciate everybody participating, staying with us the whole time. And I'm going to turn this back to Monica. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. That's a great deal. That's a really good discount. So thank you for offering that. We just have just a few more minutes. So I did want to maybe answer 1 or 2 questions live. Kathy, there's one that just came through. I thought that it was good. Where'd it go? Someone was asking about, 1 second. Oh, here's a good one, Kathy. I read once that people revert to natural styles since stress affects their ability to adapt. So the worst of their natural styles, can you speak to natural versus adapted in stress?
Yes, so your natural style is, first of all, understand that it's the real you. If left to your own devices with no outside influences, that's who you would choose to be. And typically, yes, in times of stress, that's what you're going to revert to. Right now, we are all showing up more in an adaptive environment, because anytime you are with other people, or in any kind of an environment where you're being watched or you don't get to just choose who you want to be, you are adapting to the situation. And so, yes, we tend to revert back to our natural style. So that is always going to be our behavioral tendency no matter what. Both things are happening at the same time right now. So from your natural, your core styles, that's typically what you're going to revert to. And then in these times of crisis, those things might elevate. But at the same time, you're adapting to situations around you. So both of those kinds of things are going to be going on, whether it's in the natural or the adapted, and they're going to be mixing. And that's why we were saying you might see something that is unexpected. I hope that answers that question.
That's helpful.
Good.
Yeah. And then one more, and then I think we'll close up. Joshua says, I'm the CEO of a high school, and we're talking with our teachers about their responses based on DISC styles. Any recommendation on how to use this with students, and particularly people that actually have not taken the DISC assessment or you don't know their results?
Absolutely. You know, I recommend that I am a certified K-12 teacher, by the way. I taught middle school in my early career, and then I trained and certified teachers, principals, and school counselors for 14 years. So this is my world. I absolutely, if possible, would recommend that teachers get DISC certified, because even though kids, and we're going to work on a kid DISC in the future, you can still identify the emerging styles of each of your students. And when you have this understanding, it just opens up an entirely different world for you. So I highly recommend that. I hope that begins to answer the question. I'd be happy to follow up with you if you reach out to us.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. And according to a lot of the comments, our team expression of their personal DISC styles, that was a big hit, according to everyone. They enjoyed seeing that. So thank you for the whole team, and thanks for everyone for joining us. And you'll receive an email shortly with the recording and all the other good stuff. So we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Do you want to just stay on really quickly? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Are we not broadcasting anymore?
I don't think so.
It's recording still, so we might be.
Oh, okay. Let me end it.
Yes, it's still broadcasting.